getting rid of the dummy run. Now, on the face of it, you've got a rather odd paradox in drama, because it looks like drama is entirely artificial and that the whole thing would be a dummy run. You know, we're only pretending, aren't we? There isn't anybody really is a star in our drama or anything like that. And we use words like pretend and play, and in our culture it does suggest it's ephemeral, and there's no real work-life purpose for it. But, and we do have to face it, that some drama work is a dummy run, haven't we? But then so is other classroom work trivial. It isn't only drama that can appear and in fact be trivial. So it seems to me we have to look at what is it that makes a thing not feel like it's a dummy run. So I broke all this down. I thought, now what would it have to be then if I didn't feel it was a dummy run? And so it seems to me one of the important aspects of it not being a dummy run is it matters now. We feel like it's urgent now, not, oh well, you know, we'll get on with it sort of thing. Now that means, of course, the thing I've been saying to you the whole time is the teacher takes it upon themselves, it's their responsibility in rolling role work, to make the now be part of the frame in which people operate. Now we are dealing with a library. I am a librarian. I don't maybe change my language very much, but from that point of view, I make now. Now, if you look at these, Claire, the first thing is somehow your skills and what you provide and how you provide it has to make things feel like this is going to matter. This is important. So setting in goals that seem reasonable within the context is one of the things that has to be done. They won't do it for you. They come in from another class to this class. It's not their responsibility. We create teacher dependence anyway. The teacher will invent all this. And I don't know if you've noticed in the work you've done that people, at least it's my experience, they begin to come in with ideas of their own. They butt in, you know, they jump in, or they see me at playtime and say,
That's right,
have you had that happen?
Oh, definitely.
Yes. Have you got an example?
Well, I can remember a little boy stopping me and saying, I've thought how I can work out that thing. I've changed my mind since last week. And you can tell that class, because they knew that the other classes
and he
were
was
doing
prepared to let his ideas be used by another class.
That's right.
Yes, yes. Well, that certainly is getting rid of the dummy run, you see. It is odd that within the drama mode, if you can get the contract, that would you agree that we are, for the moment, behaving with the responsibilities of, in this case, librarians we're going to be considering, they will. But it isn't won just because they said yes. It's re-won by you and lured on by you. So we go back to this mouth of yours and this stance, you know, and the forging of language. I see language as sort of solid shapes that come out on breath, and they have their own form and style that suit, in sometimes a stereotyped way, the way that sort of person with that sort of responsibility might talk. And I actually see them coming out, you know, cubist letters, you know, with 3 dimensions. The second thing is, whatever task we ask of them must feel as if it's important, which means somehow we've to empower them to be important. And, of course, worthwhile. Because one of the things we're going to try to do all the time is set in standards. So we want it worthwhile doing well, not just worthwhile to be done. But frequently the context is what makes it feel worthwhile. If we want to put this statue up to help people all realise this dog was very famous round here, I'm thinking of Bobby of Edinburgh, it is worthwhile to design it well, so that A, it looks like Bobby of Edinburgh, but B, people really can take a drink from the fountain So it is worthwhile to do it right for Bobby of Edinburgh so that everybody will understand. There also has to be a valued and perceivable outcome. I see so often what I call sitting about talking drama, where there isn't an outcome. So they get up and they go, and there isn't an outcome. If it didn't register much, well, they just say, what, so what, you know, because drama's a bit ephemeral in that sense, isn't it? If you're in the expressive mode. I see so many classes, well, I used to, where people are sitting discussing, but nobody's keeping any records. And when people go out, they don't know where their discussion has moved from here to there. English classes, for example. They don't register what they now know of a journey they've been on while they've been apparently sitting there, putting a word in now and again. And so I'm always looking for, well, okay, what is the outcome I build in to this task? Which means I get a bit schizophrenic. I'm not only saying what must I prepare, how must I engage them with it, what task will they do then, and what will doing the task do to them? And, you know, I holding that in my mind, and it has to be like that because that's the system. What will doing the task do to them? There's your curriculum. There's the learning. There's the outcome. They must also be placed in a position where they can enjoy the power to influence. They can influence the event. They can put their oar in, like the boy said. I think I've thought of a way to do that. And they must have the power to operate. So you can't give them poor tools for what it is you want. Now, in an earlier time, we mentioned putting a coat on a chair. Now, that's an example of a tool. I gave you a poorish tool because in appearance it wasn't as it should be. I used a cardigan. And if you remember, I said it needs to be a better coat than that. Now, there's an example of not only the power to influence, but the power to invent the person there, whatever the coat was, but operating the circumstances, it wasn't quite right. Do you see why it wasn't quite right?
Well, because it gave hints about the sex, and you didn't want the sex for one thing, and it wasn't really a coat.
We didn't mind if they were male or female yet, yes. And of course the tasks we create for people to do in our classroom must offer feedback possibilities. Now frequently, the feedback, as people go up the school, the feedback possibilities tend to be just in the mind. Or they're lonely feedback possibilities. I can now see I've filled this page with writing. Is a perfectly good feedback possibility. But sometimes we want feedback possibilities that crystallise something about what they have just done. I mean, I suppose again the computer is one of the most marvellous modern inventions that gives instant feedback. These machines, these one-armed bandit things or whatever people, the feedback on those is instant. There's no need for waiting for any gratification. And so all the time I'm saying, well, how can the engagement with this task constantly alter the engagement as they get the sort of feedback? The feedback I would give on memories about the coat that we've previously mentioned would be, the coat can't talk. My feedback might be, do you realise you've just invented 4 really interesting things about that person? Now that's me making sure there's feedback. Otherwise, we're just going to get a list of things shouted. Now that was a classification. But it might be just, when I listen to you people, I really get the feeling that this person is well known. Now that is not the same kind of feedback possibilities as the one I mentioned about. Do you realise you've just said 4 quite different things about the person's life? The second thing is, whatever situation we put people in, it must feel reasonable to be doing it, and it must feel genuinely truthful to be doing it in this way. Now you designed a stained glass window, didn't you? Well, you repaired one in your rolling roll. Now there is an example. The task will offer immediate feedback possibilities because every piece of coloured paper or whatever you used instantly alters all the other colours and shapes round it. There's a lovely example of feedback. But reasonable and genuine to be doing it, you've got to do something about making a stained glass window in pieces of paper. It isn't very genuine, is it, making a stained glass window with pieces of paper? However, if it's designing it to be cut later in glass, that is extremely reasonable to do it in paper. You remember Gully Jimson when he was, I can't remember now which bit it comes into, but when Gully Jimson was trying to paint a wall, and he'd got his sculpture friend who was trying to carve in stone, they couldn't get it right in stone, so they cut it out in cheese. Now that is a very reasonable, genuine system for doing it fast to see if this is what we really want when we've finished all this stonework. I always love that. We went and cut it out in cheese. Ever so reasonable, cut it out in paper. It's very reasonable because later we'll do it in glass. Later I'll go through the agony of hacking and chopping and getting my fingers off with this great block of granite that I'm working on. And of course the situation here is about the motivation of people. Why does he need to go and cut it out in cheese? Why is he doing it in stone in the first place, for goodness sake? Why are we moving a library? Or why were you needing to repair a stained glass window because of the Reformation and so on? A most important one, of course, is all the time you're creating your now time. It's much more threatening than when teachers operate on over their time. You see, if people are sitting down folded up like praying mantises and you say, I've just been thinking, supposing we were going to climb Everest. People can have quite an interesting discussion, but they don't feel very disturbed. And really they don't feel very stared at unless the teacher is saying, come on Johnson, what are you thinking? Suddenly the person feels stared at. But when you come into now time, people can very quickly feel stared at. If I'm saying, now will you remember, they can feel very threatened. So the coat for them to stare at is the least I can give them at the moment, you see, because I can't give them a real person, because that would put the sex element, whether it's male or female, in. Protecting people from feeling stared at then is essential the instant you start now. And of course in drama work, people nearly always imagine, well, if you're doing drama, you've nothing in your hands. You've nothing to manipulate much except maybe a whip or whatever the drama's about. But basically speaking, you're just you being, doing something with other people. And it's ever so easy to feel horrendously stared at. Now, of course, what I'm suggesting to you is you will be always setting tasks in. Now, the tasks sometimes might engage people in expressively behaving as if they were. But let's take that example we used in an earlier discussion when I said, okay, I'll come in with my notebook and get the people to help me understand why this person is so important in the town. I am the thing to be stared at. The pen and so on must never take the power of their memories, but that's what I am. I'm an object to be stared at, and I can feed their feeling real, actively now being a neighbour, because I can help them. Did you know him a long time? I can sidle up. But they're not going to feel a fool because I'm supporting that all the way through. And of course, this brings us to the part that is about why we can say it feeds the curriculum. We're awakening through the tasks we ask of people to do the self-spectator that makes them realise what is going on here. Now the actor naturally creates the self-spectator because the self-spectator for the actor is checking up, is this signing what my intention is? will this offer the audience the kinds of information and the modes of the vehicle of information that I require to share in this particular circumstance? So they will monitor their gesture for period, their voice, and so on, and they do this self-monitoring. When little children play and choose to be this, that and the other, the self-spectator's there because they like being important and they know they are being now very important. When we look at the self-spectator in terms of learning, the sort of feedback we're offering is A, the expressive mode they may be using is very reasonable. I could tell you a neighbour, I'll tell you how I knew. We said, did you notice how we all folded our arms? I mean, I did. I folded mine, you folded yours. The whole class would probably fold their arms, you know, because they're doing a sort of contemplative invention. Now, often I feed the self-spectator by, did you just realise what you've just done? I could tell. Did you notice how we knew she was? And that needs feeding in from the very beginning. Sometimes, if they're doing a task that might be to do with writing, but within the context of a dramatic situation, like making out job cards for a job centre, the self-spectator is alerted by the way the manager might say, do you know, I think we've got these forms right, don't you? I think we're improving. We'll have to consider something about display, and so on. There is the self-spectator. You're beginning to see the rules are actually the same. They just apply in hundreds and hundreds of different circumstances. That the things that make now time and importance are really, you could sum it all up with this. Now, it may be I've forgotten some, or I don't know them. I don't think I've forgotten any, but you might be able to think of things I don't know that you've realised about it. So I've put my last card with a question mark, because this is how teachers grow. You see, when you think about the list I've thrown at you, you're in a better position to realise what I've not thought of, that I haven't considered. And this is why I feel we function as artists when we consider teaching in this way, because we don't repeat. We follow a design, perhaps, but the design will never be identical because the circumstances are never the same. I know I've said this before, but I don't know if I've said it to you. Teaching is an open skill. Never in your life will you meet the same circumstances twice. Driving is an open skill. Even when you say it's automatic, you know, you've driven long enough to not notice, you know, the actual order you do things in. But it is an open skill. Because every time the car moves forward, you have a different set of things to see, and they'll never be the same again. And this is often why people have an accident in the most familiar places, because they've forgotten to use it as an open skill. Some things you can do, once you've learnt them, you can do them forever. The thing you do then is improve. Riding a bike, if you can balance on a bike, you can balance on a bike forever. You may have to just get it back again, but the body has learned it. The rest is being able to stay on longer, going up hills faster, and all the other things. Swimming's the same. Once you know the water will hold you up. So there's open and closed skills. And when I ask of children jobs to do, I'm always registering. Is this a closed skill? Now you see, writing is an open skill. Developing your handwriting is different than finding you something up here you can put down there. You'll never face the same situations twice, even though you might write a letter every day to a friend. It's an open situation. And so, I don't know, later you may come to things I've forgotten.